Welcome to Distributed Warfare. This is a channel that I have sort of dormant, and I'm decided to basically start doing interviews with it. My name is Newsfist, and tonight we have the salubrious darling of social research of the internet, Aydin Paladin. How you doing, Aydin?
Hello. Pretty good, pretty good. How are you? Well, I was telling you I'm having some tech problems, but other than that, that's like all the time, you know?
I'm good. And tonight we will be exploring the very, very thorny issue of whether stuff you watch make you do stuff. This has, of course, been an assumption that has driven much government policy going back 50 years, right?
Well,
Look, the old story, right? Little Johnny, he gets on the internet, he see bad stuff, then Johnny do bad stuff, right? Were you reading Dungeons and Dragons as a child? Well, that is why you turned out so screwed up. Nothing to do with your parents or anything around you, right? Did you play too much Doom, right? Are you watching
right.
too much like South Park or whatever? That is why bad stuff happened, right? Governments, of course, love this paradigm because it suggests the sort of rather seductive idea that if you could just control everything that everyone consumed, bad stuff will never happen. I mean, this is ridiculous on its face, but I think as well, people really just want an explanation for when bad stuff happened. And since we no longer have religion, we now have this kind of stuff. This, I believe, Aydin, is called cultivation theory and was part of your very, very extensive degree in social science spackery, for which, of course, you are incredibly well known. Check out her channel, Aydin Paladin. No, wrong way. This way. Yes, it's a great channel. I have had much good times absorbing the autism of your very long videos that are very, very well edited together.
Thank you. So I guess to talk about my bona fides or whatever here, when you go into doctoral school, they ask you what it is you want to specialize in, right? And so my area of specialization was communication, which is the broad field, subspecialization social psychology, and my specializations within the specialization were media psychology and intergroup psychology. So my favorite stuff, though, and the stuff that got me into studying comm, which is an interdisciplinary field, so it draws from psychology, it draws from sociology, it draws from anthropology, a multitude of social sciences, which makes it interesting because it doesn't get boxed into one field. So I got exposed to a bunch of research from all over the place, and it doesn't limit itself as much to you can only read psych journals, you can only read sociology journals, etc. And because my area of focus was on media psych, I can tell you that all of this, little Johnny sees something on TV or hears something on a naughty record or sees a video nasty or whatever it is. There's almost no evidence for this producing any kind of behavioral outcome effects. Cultivation theory is the closest that we get to any kind of long-term effects from it, but cultivation theory does not actually state, or there's no evidence within cultivation theory to evidence behavioral changes. What cultivation theory is, which is Gerbner and Gross, 1972, I think, what that posits is instead that when people are exposed to consistent worldviews, essentially, that are depicted in the media, that changes their perception of reality. The most common, I would say, and widely known application or sub-theory within cultivation is called the mean world hypothesis. And the mean world hypothesis, and this one has been very well documented, which is that when, particularly with local news, when people watch a lot of local news, and then you ask them how dangerous, for example, is your local area, how likely are you to be a victim of a crime? Those people who watch a lot of local news report that they think they are much more likely to be victimized and that crime is much more common where they live than it actually is. And that's because they're focusing on this narrative about the world, because local news is going to focus on every crime in your area. That's how they make money. That's how they keep, eyes on the screens.
I mean, you could say this was true for news generally. So, but are you technically a doctor then? Do I have to call you
I didn't
doctor,
finish
Dr.
didn't finish the PhD, but I have a master's degree and I was a doctoral student.
So you're a semi-doctor. You're like
yeah.
You're not quite a full doctor. But if the social sciences hospital was in the middle of a war zone and they needed you to do social science triage, right?
Yeah.
The government has like a problem, right? They'd call you in and you'd be like, gauze, swab, right? Let's get down and do some social science, right? That's basically So
Yeah.
okay, so mean world syndrome. Interesting enough, I actually first heard about this watching Charlie Brooker. I don't know if
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
you ever watch like Newswipe, like way, way, way back in the
Mhm.
day, right? I think of like mean world syndrome as kind of like the YouTuber disease in a sense, right? Like,
Yes.
because I have to like watch like so much news, right, in order to do my job, right? So you do get a touch of that, but surely wouldn't this apply to all news, right? Like, why was this only studied in local news? And I have a follow-up
Oh, no.
question,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
You know how women love to watch all of those thrillers about like serial killers and all that kind of it's like right.
Mhm.
Does mean world like syndrome apply then? If women like watch like a lot of serial killer dramas, are they more likely to believe that there's like a lot of serial killers around? Has anyone ever done
Yes.
this kind of study? And if not, why not?
Well, there has been research on that, and yeah, that tends to be the case.
Oh, really?
And it makes sense why women are actually drawn to serial killers and that kind of entertainment, edutainment, whatever you want to call it, from an evolutionary perspective, because all psych is evo psych. And it's like, well, why are women so fascinated and interested in serial killers? Well, because they're trying to protect themselves and look out for dangers. So women are being hyper aware of, oh, where are the threats, where are the predators, where are the people who would hurt me and my children that I need to be aware of, and what things should I look out for? So it actually makes a lot of sense. Where the women get attracted to the serial killers, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not really sure where that fits into the puzzle piece there, but women's
Yeah,
interest in true
that
crime,
is a very
that makes sense.
strange phenomenon.
Yeah.
What's the name for that? It's got some like cool.
Oh,
Oh God, I read it the other day. I can't remember, but for those watching, right, it's this well-known sort of phenomenon where you get like these crazy serial killer like rapists, and they
yeah.
go to like jail, and then you get all of these like women sending them love letters. I mean, I always assumed it was basically like I could change him.
I
Like,
think
he
maybe
just
of it, yeah.
he just hasn't had enough love, which is why his hobby was like eating the toes of random passerbys, right? He was probably just never loved in the right way.
Yeah. I'm sure there's more research on that. I'm sure there's a lot actually. I've just never looked at it. But that appears to be that appears to make sense why women watch this kind of stuff, or that they do watch a lot of this stuff, and why they watch it, and the outcome of the effect and the effect of watching it is that they think the world is a more dangerous place. However, I would say that it's better to err on the side of caution and think the world is a little bit more dangerous than it necessarily is, in some instances. That being said, all of the other stuff that you hear and have heard throughout the last 50 years or so about the effects of media exposure are so insanely overblown that it makes me want to pull my hair out every single time we have this discussion that we've been having for the last since before I was born. And since, obviously since I entered the field and studied this for myself, media effects, such as they exist at all, are extremely small. We're talking 1% sort of, variance accounted for in behavior, if you can do that. And even that's speculative, because the reality is that media does not inject you with beliefs or behaviors. It certainly doesn't inject you with behaviors. And the beliefs only come via cultivation. One of the earliest theories in media psych was called the hypodermic needle theory. And that is a very rare instance in social sciences where we abandoned a theory because it was so bad. The problem with social sciences in particular is that theories don't usually get abandoned. They just kind of get updated, or moved around and changed a little bit. Hypodermic needle theory is abandoned.
I mean, I presume all of this sort of stuff like grew out of stuff like Freud and Bernays and Packard, and this sort of original idea that you saw in sort of the modern world, that it was advertising, right, like causing people, right, and I mean, to be fair, right, whether you can believe Bernays or not, he was a shameless self-promoter, much like Freud. In case anyone watching doesn't know this, Edward Bernays was the guy who pioneered the field of public relations. He was allegedly, he was Sigmund Freud's nephew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he turned around and he took Freud's ideas about psychology, many of which have been significantly questioned, and was like, "Hey, can I use them to sell stuff to people?" And quite his most famous trick, for which he is best known, was the Torches of Freedom stunt, where a bunch of like cigarette companies said, "Listen, we need to get women smoking, right? And so he organized on the Macy's parade in New York City to get a bunch of like hot young women up on the floats to suddenly like pull cigarettes out of their garter belts and start smoking. And then the papers sort of said, oh,
Talk about it. I started doing it.
torches of freedom, bro, right? Now this, I mean, this seems to be sort of, or to reflect a weird anxiety in the West, maybe not just in the West, but this, I mean, after World War II, right? Propaganda was this big thing.
Yes.
Not even after World War II, right?
That's actually where this comes from. The research is more out of the propaganda research.
Yes. The idea that the supine masses, right? Little Johnny, he's just there in his bedroom, right? Before you know it, right, he sees an Austrian painting with a funny mustache, right? The next day he gets up and he's striding down the street and he's like chucking the Roman everywhere, and boom, that's how you get World War II. Do you think that it is possible that these kinds of theories became a sort of replacement for more complex history and more complex causes, because it's just much easier to say, well, you know, little Jimmy, you know, saw bad thing, therefore did bad thing, rather than, you know, because actual material conditions are messy and they're hard to judge, and if you want to change them, it takes like a lot of effort. Whereas like if you're just like, you know, well, we could just ban this thing, or we could do a government propaganda thing, and do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, it comes. The research tradition of this does come directly as an aftermath of World War II, and I think people now, what World War II is to the public is a big spectacle. And none of it's real. It's all these grand ideas. This is the big bad, and this is the big good. It's all very fake in the way that people perceive it. But at the time, there was a genuine curiosity of not just talking about the Holocaust, but how could this happen to Europe? How could people have come to hate each other so much and kill each other and do these terrible things? And so social psychologists were, early social psychologists really wanted to figure out particularly obedience. And that is the seminal for that is the Asch conformity experiment. Then you get the Milgram conformity or obedience experiments. And so on and so on. Zimbardo, a Stanford prison study, and his anonymity experiments. And out of that, you also get because Zimbardo was also a media psychologist, actually. So, or did some dabbling in media psychology stuff.
Stanford prison experiment was dark, man.
Yeah.
I mean, again, for viewers who may not be aware, Stanford prison experiment was a, you know, like back in the day, right? Like back when was the Stanford prison experiment? 50s or 60s?
Oh no, 70s.
70s. Okay, so back in the day, right?
Top of my head.
Social scientists weren't like the type they were now, right? Stuck in moribund universities. No, they were more like Indiana Jones, right? They'd go out there with backpacks full of LSD and, you know, just start doing these crazy experiments being funded by the CIA. And the Stanford prison experiment was it was set up to, I think, wasn't it meant to set up the proof of like how quickly people could descend into barbarism, right? Wasn't that like the original premise of it?
It was another obedience and conformity experiment in that what he was looking to investigate was essentially, if I give some people the roles of guards and some people the roles of prisoners, how will they behave to acclimate and conform to those assigned roles when they're all just students? They're not guards and they're not prisoners. Now, the problem with this study, and why it should largely be ignored, to be fair, is because Zimbardo got himself involved in the study, assuming the role of the warden, and encouraged this behavior. To what degree, we don't really know, but even in the documentation that they gave of it, he was clearly egging this stuff on, and he had a reputation of doing that in general in other research. However, I would like to point out that the Stanford prison experiment passed through the university's Institutional Review Ethics Board. They didn't see a problem with it. So,
man, if you want to hear the most messed up explanation for any kind of horrible behavior, just ask an ethicist, right? Yes. Like I have been shocked by the amount of stuff I've seen come out from like the recent thing about like, oh, you know, we need to redefine death so we can like harvest your organs before you die. Right. Like that's ethical. The idea that you should deliberately like infect people with tick bites so they stop eating meat. But the Stanford prison experiment was also happening, like, I mean, it's a little bit later than MK Ultra, but I think it taps into that sort of central point that you were talking about. Like, how did World War II happen, right? Like, how
Yes.
did brainwashing happen? Like, one of my sort of favorite stories about this period is when all the prisoners started coming back from Korea, right? And the Chinese had like brainwashed them, and the Americans, bless their hearts, right? They thought there must be some high-tech solution going on here, right? And so, like the Americans, right, they're like, maybe it's some kind of drug, right? Like maybe it's like flashing lights, right? Because they're Americans.
Right.
And it turned out that what the Chinese were doing actually was just sticking people in barracks, right? In a situation where like everyone reported on each other, right? Occasional beatings, stress positions, and relentless like writing of self-criticism. It was the lowest of low-tech stuff. But the Americans are like, we got to make a drug, or maybe thing with like blinking flashing lights and, you know, sleep therapy, all this like crazy.
And what's it called? Remote viewing and you know, psychic stuff. You know, all
They
that.
did a lot of that as well, didn't
Yeah,
they?
yeah, they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
The going back to the crux of all that, though, what comes out of that originally as a theory in the media psych stuff, and figuring out how do these ideas seep into people, is that hypodermic needle theory, the abandoned one, and that one proposes that media literally injects things into people's brains like a needle. Ideas, behaviors, norms, all of these things. That, again, abandoned theory because it's just not, there's no evidence for it. It's just not true. All of the other theories we've come up for since are trying to explain a fraction of a percentage of what does appear to be any effect of media on people's beliefs or behaviors. And it's largely beliefs. The behavior stuff tends to be instantaneous and short term. So, for example, if you have a very stressful gaming experience, almost everyone I think who's played a video game knows this, makes your blood pressure go up and you get real tense. So you've had a mediated experience, and then if you have to go do something else, you're still in that heightened sense of what's described as arousal in the literature. So you're very aroused. You're very aroused, and that can cause you to be more easily activated by other stuff, more aggressive. Usually, aggressive is what they're looking for there. But that's really all they can find. On the belief side of things, the most important study is the McCombs and Shaw 1979 agenda setting theory, which is they found the strongest correlation I have ever seen to this day in the social sciences, which is a correlation of 97 between what stories the media reports on and what topics people think are important. It is a near 100% correlation, and it is held up to this day more or less with that kind of level of extreme near 1-to-1 correlation, even with the internet, and also, by the way, why they might want to rein the internet in to make sure that it does stay near that 1-to-1 correlation, that whatever the media says is important is what people think is important. Well, so if there's, you know, some stuff they don't want you thinking about.
This is for government, this is an incredibly seductive framework, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not just for government, you know, for big business, right? Like, you know, the plebs will do what we want them to do. Now, after, like, you know, watching everything that happened with COVID and watching what's going on with, you know, the UK at the moment, which is like a, you know, massive shit show, I have come to the conclusion that that Orwell was basically correct, right? In as much as it is not actually narratives that drive people's change in beliefs and behavior. It is events, right? But the narratives provide like a sort of a track, as it were, right? So you might have, you know, you've got someone, an annoying friend, right, who's always going on about, you know, my lockdowns and this, that, and the other, right? And as long as none of it actually affects you in any sort of real way, right, you will just continue along the current narrative structure in which you inhabit, right? Once an event impacts you, then it is destabilized and you have a chance to switch tracks. This is why, I mean, you know, to coin a phrase, you can't really red pill people, right? Because it is not arguments that change people's beliefs. It is events, right? And the reason I referenced Orwell, oh no, wait, not Orwell, Bezmenov, right? The idea that until the boot of the state engages kinetically with the soft, fleshy, dangly bits of the person involved, right? You're not going to change your mind. Well, I mean, why would you, right? I mean, to change your mind is an effort. To have one's narrative structure disrupted is a pain. No one can go through that, right? So this would suggest that
Well, it's quite literally it's not a physical pain, but cognitive dissonance activates the same areas of the brain in some instances as physiological pain. So understand that for people to change their mind about something, particularly if it's been propagandized to them and then they've repeated it, if they've gone out and repeated it, well, now they've acted. And now it becomes very difficult for them to disassociate from that belief or that behavior without causing, because you have to admit you were wrong, and you have to do a mea culpa, and mea culpa, the stripping of nakedness of someone to admit fault, is extremely psychologically uncomfortable.
So this, I mean, so this would suggest that it is belief or information coupled with action, right?
Mhm.
So unless you're actually going to go to Mars and run around corridors shooting demons, Doom is not really going to like affect your
Yeah.
action very much, right? Or you play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and one day
Mhm.
you go out into the street, a huge dragon comes like crashing down, and you're like, oh my god, I'm in Skyrim. Like in terms of action, video gamers, I mean, you're just sitting there like clicking the thing. There's not really um I feel like a lot of this is just massively overblown, and I think quite frankly a lot of it is too many women in
Oh
politics
yeah.
as well. This idea
Well,
that I
the
don't know,
people who
you
are
can
responsible for the game stuff are men. I can tell you that because I know who they are and I'll name them. But
but like
so
you can soothe away
yeah,
all the bad
right.
feeling. Like I see this with porn as
Mm,
well, right?
right.
It's very very weird, right? Like they seem to believe that they can modify human sexuality by simply controlling pornography, and I see no evidence that this is true. Like just even a brief reading of history would indicate that people have always been degenerates, right, to greater or lesser degrees, and the way that this is controlled is generally through efforts to get people to improve themselves morally, not through some kind of massive imposition of the state, and even that can only really go so far.
Well, I've not read a lot of the pornography research, not of any of the newer stuff. Oh gosh, his name's escaping me. He used to teach at my institution before I went there. He conducted a lot of research, though. It'll come to me maybe. Probably will come to me in like 45 minutes when we finish this up. He conducted a lot of early research on pornography and its effects, but I haven't read a lot of the modern stuff. However, what I do know of it is that it does appear to be a pretty negative thing for people psychologically overall, and that's probably because it does have an inherent behavioral component involved with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not
Mm-hmm.
passively taking it in like you are a movie or even a video game that has haptic response. And have been some interesting things with the video game stuff, but it doesn't manifest in a little bit of aggression, like I said, from heightened arousal. We find that, but we don't find violence. That not a single study in with all the money the government poured into that, particularly in the 90s, not a single study has been able to find any direct correlation between video games and violent behavior. What a more recently identified interesting thing that was found only a couple years ago is something called game transfer phenomenon. But it's not like going out and shooting people in real life because you play GTA. What it is really bizarre, and to the point I actually don't know if I believe it. But it seems quite consistent in the respondents saying that when they go outside, they will see video game HUDs over their eyes, or will walk past a bush and they'll have an urge to go dig through it and look for loot. That's the kind of stuff that that game transfer phenomenon seemed to find,
So
but not violence.
we're not inculcating people with violence. We're making more trash pandas. Is basically what you're saying.
Something, if it's doing anything, it seems that it's not the because violence. It's pretty hard to get people to be violent for the most part because they do have maybe like even a little subconscious part of their brain that goes, don't do that because you'll get in trouble if nothing else, right?
Mm.
So not everybody has that, you know. But then you've sociopaths, psychopaths, criminal people who already have. That's what the literature has generally found. If you already have a proclivity towards violence and aggression, then playing video games may make it a little worse, but only if you already have that propensity. Regular people who play Call of Duty to blow off steam aren't. There's absolutely no evidence for that. Porn, like I said, I think that but even that I've not seen any evidence, and don't quote me on this one because I don't like reading the porn research. It's just icky. And that's why they want to put this stuff in, because no one wants to talk about it, because everyone feels uncomfortable talking about pornography. And if you do feel really comfortable talking about pornography, no one wants to talk to you. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and you're probably one of those like weird blue head like people, right? Like, you know, I mean, no,
yeah.
I mean, like, I'm not standing for pornography, right? My point is that I've noticed recently there seems to be this trend, particularly among the sort of worrying women, right? That
Mhm.
you can delete an urge from
Right.
people, right? And whether this is violence or, you know, prohibited kinds of sex or whatever, right? And rather than trying to control the action, as it were, right? Stop, you know, less people doing horrible things, right? They think that the shortcut to that is to stop people ever thinking about the thing, because, you know, I presume the reasoning goes, well, to do a thing you have to think about it first, right? But this just doesn't hold up, right? Like,
No.
if this was the case, then, you know, every person who'd ever written like a violent novel, and I just find it weird that this is sort of frequently deployed in the aid of sex, but very rarely deployed in the aid of violence, right? Like, no one's saying, oh, we now have to make it so that no one ever dies on TV, for example. We must ban all cop dramas or all action films, or, you know, because if someone sees like somebody shoot a gun on TV, they will, you know.
Well, I think that in the American bill, it says something about cartoon violence. I'm fairly sure. Um, One of them says something about it doesn't specify cartoons, but it says something about simulated violence, and that also potentially being banned, or being coming under this, not under 18s allowed to access it. So like if you and I heard, was it Legal Mindset who said this? I don't remember who. I heard someone who had some background in law mention it, though. I think that said something like, technically SpongeBob SquarePants would count under that as being a depiction of violence, like the salty spittoon scenes, you know, where he gets beat up because he's a little, you know, Weenie Hut Juniors. um, so it's going way too far, and it's because none of it has to do with research, none of it has to do with the reality of this stuff. It's about digital ID, but they, as usual, have pulled out the useful idiots, in this case being the cloying, pearl clutching women who are going, please, won't someone think of the children or the women? And then, of course, they find themselves at odds with half of the women on, well, not half, but with a portion of women who are sex workers or sex positive or whatever you know they want to call themselves, who don't want their OnlyFans or whatever to be shut down, which is how they've been making a lot of money. So, and it's interesting that the OnlyFans kind of women have, for the most part, been rather quiet about this, and I'm guessing that's because they don't feel threatened by it for some reason. Which should be telling, I think, more than anything. Why are they not having a complete meltdown?
I mean, I don't know, right? I mean, it's very very strange, right? Like, I just think that I think you're right. I think this is being deployed in
Oh
the
yeah.
aid of digital ID. I had some other point, but it drifted out of my brain. It's a shame. It was a good one.
Well, just the video games violence stuff, which is a large part of this, is about the video game stuff. I mean, they removed all the specifications that they gave to that one website has AI in the name. I can't remember, but that one leaked the exact kinds of things they wanted removed, and it was things like menstruation and any sort of like vomit, that kind of stuff too. But then it was also uh, holding a gun at someone in a sexual, or pointing a gun at someone in a sexual context, which you could say if you have a zombie that's topless and running at you and you shoot at it, that's now in a sexual context
Oh
because
yeah,
it's a
you should
nudity.
see the rules for UK porn. They have
Yeah.
now. I found an article. It's just it's crazy, right? And the article I read was noting that a lot of these things that are banned, right? Like, you know, slapping or choking or, you know, whatever,
Mhm.
are actually very popular with women, right? Because
Yeah.
the whole thing, of course, is phrased, right? Like, you know, we must prevent sexual violence, not
Right.
by stopping the import of, like, you know, millions of people from the third world, of course, right? But, you know, by like control, like shutting down porn studios. Who the hell is filming porn in the UK? Oh, I say, would you like some tea and biscuits?
Well,
Ooh, like,
again, you know who I don't see complaining is Bonnie Blue. Why is she
Yeah.
not complaining? And speaking of the porn industry in the UK, you'd think that she would be out on the streets doing something other than getting railed. But no, she's just still doing that as per normal. I at least I've not seen anything from the porn women complaining about this, except for Anita Sarkeesian, bizarrely enough, uh, flipping. She's just, I think, following trends
Yeah,
for
I
attention
totally
or
forgot
whatever.
about Bonnie Blue. That's a real.
Yeah.
Apparently, actually, they're bringing in a new law because of her, where you're not allowed to do anything like, quote unquote, barely legal. So like, no school uniforms, no like.
Oh, okay.
No, okay. So I remembered my point, right, which
Mhm.
was about the sequence of events, right? I presume, like, has there been much research done into like what it is that makes people more prone to violence? I presume this is a genetic component, right? And I presume no one really wants to like touch that, right? Because there lies a number of sort of thorny questions about different populations and their propensity for violence, right? So
Yeah,
is
you're
it
not
the
going to get at that in research on genetics, on genetic precursors to things like this, are very difficult to get done. And it largely was abandoned about 50 years ago, by the way. That's when you stopped seeing a lot of genetic research on this. There still is some, but you have to understand it's like you can't get funding for this at all. Certainly not. It probably can't get approved. And the reason it can't get approved through the ethics research that said, the ethics board that said A-OK to the Stanford Milgram experiment, or Stanford prison experiment, excuse me, got my experiments mixed up, is because they know what the implication might be. And they know that someone might take those findings, no matter what they are, and misunderstand them or use them in a way that is, counter to liberal narratives and the liberal hegemonic belief system that everybody is equal, everyone is a tabula rasa. So it's very hard to get any genetic work done. But we do know, and there has been enough research conducted, that things like personality traits can be passed down. We know this. First of all, you don't need research for this. Everyone knows this intrinsically, like father, like son, to a certain amount, that traits are passed down, not just the way that you physically look, but also some of your behavioral tendencies, will be passed down genetically. So if you have someone who's very violent, whether it be entirely nature or nurture, because they probably were raised in a bad household, if their parent was violent as well, can be difficult to break down. But it does seem that the genetic factor loads very heavily. About 80% on most things are genetic. Somewhere between 50 and 80%. 50 is a very low. Very high would be like 90. So in that vicinity.
So once again, we are trapped by tabula rasa and social constructivism.
Yeah.
Yet again, right? Because under social constructivism, under the tabula rasa, right, we are all pooped out as just little blank slates, right?
Mhm.
We could all be anyone, right? Like, like technically, right? Anyone could be Gandhi, anyone could be the Austrian painter, right? And it's
Right.
just all down to the socio-economic circumstances that impact. Does anyone really? I really wonder, in the future, whether people will write the history of the West and basically say, yeah, there's a whole civilization that destroyed themselves because of social constructivism, because they just couldn't admit that different populations are different, despite, and like, diversity, and everybody's different, but like not different. Like, so everyone's exactly the same, but everyone's also like different and
Different
must
and
celebrate
unique
their
and
differences.
special. Yes, yes. I don't remember who I saw say this on Twitter. It might have been AA, but recently, which was something along the lines of they're going to need to look at YouTubers in the future, because nothing that you see on the news, nothing that's published in journal articles, you're going to have to like look at what people said on the internet to be able to even like historians will have to,
Yeah.
because the news lies, all kinds of public figures lie, science lies all of the time. So, and there's no consequences for it for the most part. So, and in fact, it's encouraged by the state. So I don't know how you try to piece this period of history back together in the future, because it's
Oh
going to
yeah.
look absolutely insane.
Imagine trying to understand COVID
Oh,
by only looking at official news sources, but for
yeah.
news sources. By the way, historians of the future, if you're like watching it, shout out to my future historians. We're dead now. But I just want to tell you, this was a really crazy time to be alive. Don't
Sure
do
was.
that again. Yeah, I mean, you would absolutely need to like look at YouTubers, right? Or you wouldn't,
Yeah.
and this makes me wonder a lot about history in general, right? And back in the day, I mean, I guess you could dig up a book written by some random person, but YouTube sort of is much more immediate, right? People record it
Mhm.
while the events are actually happening, right? Which makes me wonder, at some point, is some government going to like try and go back and just like purge the totality of YouTube so that no one can see the horrors of this time, or at least the people who caused it
Well,
can't be blamed.
I mean, YouTube has announced they're putting in all of these AI systems now, and I
Mm,
would not be surprised if somewhere in some update, if it's not already in there, it's going through and going to delete just, house cleaning. We're just going to clean up all these old videos that don't, and for the most part, they probably won't matter. Um, but the thing about COVID that's fascinating is I'm doing another video that relates a little bit to COVID because if you're talking about science, and anything that happened over the last 5 years, you have to talk about it because it was involved in all of it.
mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter what field. It does not matter what scientific field COVID came into the mix because that was the focus of all science for about 3.5 years. Um, but I lost my train of thought. Oh, YouTube deleted all that, and people. There was an article. I think I often say it's in the Atlantic, but it was in the New York Times. I double checked the other day. That said, we will forget much of the pandemic, and that's a good thing. It was a neuroscience article. I can't
Yeah.
forget that. That one's indelible to my
Yeah.
hippocampus, Christine Blasey Ford, because what it's true. I just made this huge 3.5 hour long video about this guy Didier Raoult, who is a very important scientist, a medical doctor working during the pandemic in France, and it was doing terribly. And I asked some people, what did I do wrong, or what would you recommend? What did you made you not interested in watching this, just from my community? And they said the people I talked to said I don't want to think about COVID ever again,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they don't even have to censor it.
Have you they're still doing the COVID inquiry at the moment,
Oh,
right?
I
So
know. Yeah.
I follow them on Twitter, right?
Hmm.
And every so often they'll post like an update, 20 views,
Yeah.
one like.
Yeah. People
And
don't
I
want to hear
this
about it.
this has made me wonder, right? Like whether the trick to brutalizing a society, right, is just to go as hard as possible, right? And if you go hard enough, like a beaten spouse or like a traumatized person, right? They'll just forget about it. Like you just, oh yeah, that happened. That was very unpleasant. Let's not think about that again. But as you said, the effects are all around us, right? Like,
Hmm.
the double whammy of COVID and DEI, or I guess, and mass immigration. So
Hmm.
the triple whammy is around us every day, right? Like, I mean, in terms of cultivation theory, right? Like,
Hmm.
COVID was a time when um I had never seen government propaganda, right? Like kick up to that notch, number one.
Yeah.
But number two, I had never seen government propaganda weaponized so directly against the population, right?
Yeah.
Usually, if you go back in like World War II, right, and you look at the propaganda the government was putting out, right, it was all very
Yeah.
very positive, right? Like we'll
Yes.
bash the Bosch, we'll hammer the Hun, right?
Right.
Hold
Right.
in
Yeah.
there, guys. It's the home front. Everything's going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
COVID was the complete opposite, right? It was the government deliberately ginning things up. Like, you might recall like the posters that were deliberately in like puke yellow and urine green, right? Like
Yep.
those particular shades, like that are shown to like exhibit like the most
Disgust
disgust
effect.
reaction
Yep.
in people. Act as though you've got it, right? Like I've never
Yep.
seen government like literally turn around and try and just deliberately traumatize its own population to such an extent. It was
Well, it's because, as it turns out, positive messaging is less effective as a persuasive tool. Uh, it just is. People tend to remember negative things more readily than they do positive things. Negative things stick out. Something that anyone who does YouTube or even who has a Twitter account or whatever can say is that if you get a bunch of responses of people agreeing with you or saying they like what you've done or something like that, and you get one person who's like, you suck and fuck you, that's the one that sticks out because negativity is just more salient. Again, from an evolutionary perspective, it's because you don't want to be harmed, or you don't want to cause harm, or whatever it is like that. You're trying to make things copacetic. So you're looking for the not the agreement, and that's going to be more readily available in your brain. And the stuff with COVID too is that, and it's not just COVID, but it is an exemplar of it. If memories are very traumatic, and this is so if you use fear-mongering techniques, by the way, you will just cordon it off in a part of your brain in the same way that it's not PTSD, but it operates the same way that PTSD does. In that, and if it gets activated by similar sort of mechanisms, you go, oh, nope, that's too related to the thing that caused me distress, so I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to shut it off. I'm not going to pay any attention to this because it's activating that part of my brain that was traumatized. And that's how effective it is. Look, you don't even have to censor stuff about COVID anymore because people just do not want to think about it. They self-censor.
Does this mean that the government has, in effect, left landmines essentially in the brains of all of these populations that they could then just sort of like reach in at some future point and just sort of start tickling, and everyone be like,
yeah,
don't reactivate my, COVID PTSD. Like,
yeah.
I mean, what happens traditionally when people with PTSD have like a reactivation? Do they like shut off, or do they get all like bleh, like,
There's different reactions from different types of people, and I'm not like a clinical psychologist or anything, so I'm not going to speak to that too much. But it manifests differently in different people. But oftentimes, well, the shell shock, it's just cutting off, and that's what that neuroscience article in the New York that was reported on by the New York Times was talking about. Is that it's a wall, this defensive mechanism that the brain basically builds around these memories to cordon them off from the rest of your schema, because it's so painful to activate. And people know what they did. People know the things that were done to them, and people know the things that they did to their own families and friends during COVID over a freaking flu. And no, that has to be devastating for the people who were the commandants, the commissars of COVID. They know exactly what they did, and I imagine on some level it does make them feel shitty. So of course they're just going to ignore that for the rest of eternity until they die.
I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, like, cultivation theory must have some crossover with government propaganda, but I just maybe this is the thing. It is a matter of degree and a matter of enforcement, right?
I can tell you a real world way that cultivation theory works, though. But go ahead.
So like, if COVID had just been a video game, right, it would have had no effect, right? But if I don't know, like, say Jimmy's playing GTA, right, and then the next day he goes outside, right, and the government hands him a gun and is like, right, now, for the good of the country, you have to go and like run over a bunch of hookers, right? Therefore, sort of like actually forcing action, right? Then it would sort of escalate and manifest out. Whereas, like, just sitting around, like, playing with your controller, there's no real sort of real world thing to link that to.
No, it's totally different. The haptic feedback stuff's all different. The way that you use a gun in a video game with a little controller with a keyboard, if you're, good, then then it's totally different from how you actually operate a firearm. So
Yes.
it doesn't. One of my favorite examples of that is that the video game journalist who they even had him in VR, and he was so afraid to pick up the virtual gun, he was in tears over it. But that still doesn't even translate. Even in the VR thing, it in no way translates to the physical act of holding and firing a firearm. So that's probably just one of the many reasons we don't find that there's any causal link at all between playing violent video games and real world perpetration of violence.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's just completely, man. I've seen some weird stuff from journos, right? Like live
yeah.
journos, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to like fire a gun for the first time. Yeah, all right. Like,
Yeah.
go on, right? Just like,
Yeah.
I
Many
can't
people
believe
have
I'm
before you.
holding this machine of death. You're like, gay.
Yeah, it is very gay. Oh, the place where you see cultivation theory probably most prevalent is in both in the US and the UK. I've seen research on this, which is the people's exposure to advertisements and their beliefs about the demographic breakdown of society. The like how many Black people are there in the US, right? People who watch a lot of TV think that there's like half the population is Black, because when you watch American TV shows or like UK commercials, every other person is Black. in the US, of course, it's like 13%. In the UK, it's considerably less than that. But if you watch TV, you would get the belief that it's 30, 40, 50% of the population just because of the prevalence.
Right, but these are attitudes, not
Yes, they're
actions,
not behaviors.
right? Like,
Yes.
like I mean, in a sense, this is sort of the essence of propaganda, is to
Mhm.
change the attitude and then hope that people's behaviors change. Which would, I mean, it would be very, very interesting if we could, go back to COVID. Not that I would ever want to go back, right? But if they had not actually brought in any of the measures, right, and they just launched a propaganda war, and they're like, you're free to get the vaccine, right? I mean, you're not going to
Right,
die
of
otherwise,
course.
right?
Of
But they
course, yes.
didn't put any mandates. They didn't put any of this kind of like other stuff. How much would that attitude have transitioned into action? Is this the secret missing source that they don't really sort of like want to admit, that it is not enough to just, alter the opinion, or, there has to be some kind of force applied in order to drive action in relation to that opinion?
I very much think that COVID was real. Obviously, it was a real thing. But I think that worldwide governments look at that and said, this is an absolutely excellent opportunity to test a whole bunch of psychological stuff and figure out what works and what doesn't. Because with the way that, the science changed every other week. Now, some of that was updating with new information, but a lot of that science was being updated with, well, why don't we try this? Can we get everybody to wear these cloth masks? Well, I don't know. Why? How would they possibly believe that that works to prevent microscopic viruses that are, 1,000th the size of a dust mote, when I can smoke my vape and blow it through my cloth mask and see the dust come out the other side? I mean, just the abject prima facie absurdity of stuff like that. And people believed it, and were not just believed it, but became, again, commissars. They became officers, deputies of the state to enforce those rules. And I do think what they learned from that is that it's not just enough to put out the narratives and the opinions. It needs to be backed up with force. So
And you have to alter the incentive
yeah,
environment as well, right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, this was another thing that sort of, I mean, I would be, what's your opinion on the Stanford prison experiment and the Milgram experiments, right? And what's the name of that guy, like the Biederman scale, and of coercion and stuff like that, right? Like, based on what you saw with COVID, right? I mean, surely the fundamental lesson, right, that people are supposed to take away from the Stanford prison experiment, right, is that we're only really, sort of like slightly edging towards like barbarism. And if you give people motivation, and if you allow them and give them incentives to be complete assholes, then they'll do it, right? I mean, but this isn't really the amazing revelation that people think it is, right? People have understood like that incentive drives behavior surely like forever, right?
Oh yeah. All the modern field of psychology and the social science has done is tried to quantify this stuff. But even more important than Stanford Prison, which, like I said, as a study, it's a mess. It probably has it been retracted? I actually don't think it has, but it should have been. It's the methods are. I think it can't be retracted because it's so important to the history of science now. But it methodologically speaking, it's a complete and utter mess. The more important one is Milgram, and Milgram continues to be replicated to this day with almost no changes in the breakdown of respondents and how they tend to react to it, and variations on the Milgram experiment. And COVID was a mass level experiment in Milgram, which is a man in a white coat is going to tell you to do something.
Yeah.
And that's all that was.
But
Men in white coat and women in white coats told you to do something.
But I mean, but can human society even survive without that reflex? Right? Like
No,
you could make an argument,
probably
right,
not.
that the part of the brain that Milgram hooks into, right? And for those of you who are not aware, the Milgram experiment, basically was like they got people in like a room with like supposedly like a scientist, but it was actually part of the experiment. And on the other side of a partition was like someone, and they were like told to give them electric shocks of increasing frequency, and the person on the other side, they weren't really being shocked, but they'd be like, oh my god. And I forget the exact percentage, but a sizable number of people,
33%, I believe. It was 30 something percent. It was a third.
30 something percent of people proceeded to deliver shocks that would have been lethal to just some random person because the dude in the white coat, right, like told them to, right? Surely this fundamental reflex enables the formation of armies, enables like royalty, like monarchy, like systems of government, like all these kinds of sort of like, you know, reflexive hierarchical structures that wouldn't even be able to exist if you didn't have this part of the, I guess you call it the yes man clan.
Well, it's human. We are a hierarchical species. We want someone to. Everyone wants someone to. Whatever people say, and I know there's libertarians freak out. As a recovering libertarian myself, I understand it. The inherent like aversion to what I'm about to say. Most people want to be told what to do. They just do because it's easier. Everything in life is easier if someone tells you what to do and they take responsibility for what happens. So then it's like, oh, I don't have to think. And if something bad happens, I don't take any blame. Well, why shouldn't I do that?
Yeah.
And if I think it benefits me in some way, and in the case of Milgram, they get paid by completing the experiment. Maybe they were worried, well, maybe I won't get my 30 cents or whatever they paid them. It was something like that, of course, because it was 60s, I think, for Milgram. Pay you 10 cents, 15 cents, whatever, to do this experiment. Well, if I say no, are they not going to pay me? Right, even that little reward is enough.
But there's another possibility as well, right? Like what if it's something you actually want to do?
That too. Then
society has always been like, oh man, I just really love to go and like torture some random person. You know what I mean? Like, but society really frowns on that kind of stuff. I'd probably get in trouble, right? And then like, dude in the white coat's like, hey, right? Why don't you just go and like torture someone? Like, it's totally okay. The government like absolutely wants you to. We'll even pay you money. You'll be the good guy, right? Like. I mean,
that's where you got all the narking on their family and friends and neighbors. And I saw that Jim walked outside yesterday without his mask. I better go make a report. And that is, it's not limited only to women, but that's a very feminine thing, very long house. They're violating the rules of society. We have set up, these are the rules in the way that we've decided it must be, and they are violating it. Therefore, they're destroying social cohesion. That's very feminine. But it relies still on a masculine hierarchy power figure above you to say these are the rules. And yeah, then people actually, they don't even need to be incentivized. The incentives help get more people on board. But the moral sense of superiority that people feel by, enforcing the rules, that's a reward in and of itself. And that's the same thing with all these bans on pornography, when, again, framing it as bans on pornography and just keeping children safe is, of course, I don't know who on earth at this point, even 2 weeks in, believes that. It was proven wrong and incorrect the day that the Online Safety Act rolled into effect. The first thing that they did was to censor, protests. They didn't.
Yeah, but you know how government works, right?
Right.
You just take a plausible explanation and you just keep repeating it. Right. Like we saw this in spades during COVID, right? Doesn't matter if no one believes it, right? When challenged, you just keep repeating the thing, right? Like my $22 billion black hole, right? Like keep like, this is actually one of the things that I found like just most infuriating about COVID. I remember the first time the science changed, right? I remember it well. I'm no biologist, but even I knew that there had always been problems in making a vaccine for the common cold because it mutates so much, right?
All the time.
It mutates like a lot. Beta coronaviruses, they mutate like hell, right? You couldn't make a vaccine because by the time you got the vaccine out, right? Then all of a sudden, the science had changed. I'm like, I don't think everybody's like immune systems. I don't think the mutation rate of beta coronaviruses generally has suddenly changed, right? But obviously, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Like
no. I mean, let's. I just happened to look this up because it came up in my research. AstraZeneca vaccine, right? That what came out of the Oxford COVID study. Because I was reading an article from back in the time that was published, where this one guy who I'm making this video on, he read that study and said the vaccines have zero short-term and zero long-term effects. Now, you could not have known that long-term thing at all because the vaccine I mean, I can't believe they were able to get away with this, but they did. And flipping the way science works on its head. But like there was that just perception that we already know how it works. We know there's zero short-term effects, zero long-term effects that totally violate the way that scientific research is conducted. People believe it. AstraZeneca pulled from the market last year.
Well, they just did that thing, right, where
Mhm.
you induce panic in a whole bunch of
Yeah.
people, and then you say, "Oh, look, there's no time to think, right? There's no time to have a discussion. You
Right,
just
we're all
have
gonna
to do
die.
this. The house is on fire, right?
Yeah.
Like, like just leave, right? Yeah, sure, we're gonna like steal all of your stuff, but like the house is on fire, right? Like, and people are like, wait. No, there's no time. There's no time, right? Panic is actually like incredibly disabling
Oh, yeah.
in terms of like what it does to people's like cognitive ability.
Wait, because you don't have time to process things cognitively. You have to process heuristically based on survival. You think, if I don't listen to the rules, well, what's the COVID update today? What's the threat level or whatever? And I remember this going back even further. I've been thinking about this more and more recently. Do you remember the terrorism threat levels in the early 2000s after 9/11?
I
When
do.
what's the terrorism threat level today? It's 97 degrees terrorism outside, like just and people it's constantly being reinforced to them that this is a danger. It's making them constantly aware of it, and because they're constantly aware and hyper vigilant about it, it makes them always afraid, and people will do all kinds of very silly and stupid things out of fear. Fear is a far more powerful motivator, and that's why they go with fear and anger and outrage as methods of persuasion and propagandizing, less than happiness and in-group solidarity that you saw being used more as propaganda during the Second World War, at least in England and the U.S.
Do you think that cultivation theory and its ilk is being cynically used as a way to distract people from the very real manipulation being performed by like governments and like multinational organizations, and to try and sort of distract people from the idea that it is in fact to a large part governments in fact that drive behavior through the manipulation of incentives and messing with the economy, and right, and it's just sort of a convenient scapegoat, right? Like, oh look, violent crime and rape are massively up because we imported like millions of people from highly violent countries. I know, right? Let's blame video games, or right, like let's blame Pornhub, right? Again, not standing for Pornhub, but I don't, we've had this
Yeah.
stuff for quite a while. And it was only when mass immigration spiked that all of a sudden we're seeing all of these.
Now you got a problem with sexual assault. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you one way that cultivation also has manifested is in the denigration of the conspiracy theorist. If you
Oh,
don't
yes.
go along with what the government says, then you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. And you can point to, for example, one of my favorite TV shows of all time, The X-Files, which even though that show predicted 9/11, but well, not that one, but Millennium did, the tie-in
Yes.
show. Uh, and even though it was extremely like there was some stuff in there that is very much based on real declassified files and things like that,
Yep.
it made it so, what are you talking about? That's a TV show. That's not
Yep.
real. You're crazy. That's a TV
Yep.
show. That's fake. So they dramatized conspiracy theories into being it's all fake. It's media. It's fantasy. There's a great episode of Stargate SG-1. There's actually two, where this is a whole part of the plot is that they have this Stargate program that goes to other planets. People start to find out about it, in the press and stuff. And in order to get around it, the U.S. government, the Air Force that runs the Stargate program, commissions a television show about the Stargate program to be made and aired, so that anytime anyone starts to talk about this Stargate program, which of course is a different thing in real life, but is also a conspiracy theory, but declassified documents though on that. But anytime anyone would hear, oh, the government's got a big ring that goes to other planets, they go, that's a TV show, you idiot. And
Yeah.
so they've really ramped up people as conspiracy theories, or the idea of conspiracy theorists, as a joke, and as something that people, it's all fake, and it's performative stuff. So that anytime you hear something that sounds, the government would never lie to us. That's a TV show. That's a movie.
That's basically the root of it,
Yeah.
really, right?
Mhm.
Is number one, you don't trust the government. And number two, the government or other sort of spooky interest groups are capable of long-term planning, right? This is the
Yeah.
other part of a conspiracy theory. You're not supposed to. No, look, there's no one ever makes long-term plans, right?
Right.
What are you? Everybody knows, right, that government, the entirety of government, operates in these 4-year slices, right?
Yeah.
So the only plans that are capable of ever being hatched by literally anyone in the West have a life cycle of 4 or 5 years. That's just the way it goes. What are you suggesting, that someone could formulate a plan that would like last 40 years, which is not a long time, by the way. Like
No,
this is
it's
what
really
I find like,
not.
so absurd, right? If the idea that you could hatch a plan that would just take place over an average human lifespan, like 70 years, everyone's like,
Yeah.
don't be silly. Well, just because you lack imagination, you
Well,
know.
why don't you just apply it to your life? How many people have any kind of plan? Not saying it's a good one, but any kind of plan for retirement. You spend your whole adult life planning for this thing, working towards this thing that takes about 40 years or thereabouts to get towards. Why is it so absurd to believe that if you do that in your personal life, that there wouldn't be long-term plans that last longer than 1 or 2 years that the government, particularly considering that even if the president changes, the PM changes, whatever, the cogs that grease, the wheels of the machine, all of the bureaucracy, all of the people who run the government, they work for the government for 40 years in their careers. So they're stable fixtures. And what do they also do? Train the people who replace them, and so on and so forth. So if you're able to plan for retirement, if you're able to put away money and save up to buy a house for 10 years, why is the government not capable of doing that at a grander scale?
Oh, well, because it's a conspiracy theory, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're up to an hour.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for coming, Aiden. That was a
Yeah.
fascinating chat. We must do this again. Would you like
Yeah,
to
sure.
plug your channel? I'll make sure to stick it in the show notes and stuff.
Yeah, sure. It's Aydin Paladin, Aydin Paladin. The video I'm working on is this guy, Dr. Victor Grech. He published technically 19. One of the two of them got kind of submitted twice, and there was some weirdness there. But so let's just say 17 papers about Star Trek in a neonatal and fetal medicine journal.
What?
Yeah,
What,
I
like
get to talk about Star
Klingon
Trek.
babies? What are the possibilities, kind of thing?
It was more like I just feel like writing about Star Trek, and it's COVID era, so I can publish whatever the hell I want because no one's reading this stuff right now. That was it.
Wow.
In my opinion, I'm trying to get in contact with him because he doesn't actually seem like a bad guy. I think he just saw this as an opportunity. And again, it's actually brings us back to the COVID stuff. This is a really good opportunity. Everyone is publishing a ton of stuff because COVID's so interesting. I just put COVID somewhere in the manuscript, and then the rest of it is literally just a Wikipedia summary about a Star Trek episode. That's what the papers are. 17
Yeah,
papers.
BLM was like that as well.
Yeah,
Right. Remember just the rash of social sciences papers,
Yep.
like every single one of which started with, right, in 2020 or whenever it was, George Floyd died right under the knee, and therefore systemic racism. We will now go on to examine the systemic racist nature of kiwi fruits and their distribution in the wider population.
Make a bunch of money, get a bunch of research grants, we'll get tenure, and then we can retire, essentially. Very opportunistic, very cynical. I don't know how cynical this guy is. He seems to just really like Star Trek, I think, honestly. But it's kind of like
that sounds bad. You should all watch. No, seriously, it's a great channel. Thank you so much for coming, Aydin.
Thanks.
And you can check out all of my other stuff at www.newsfist.net. I do a bunch of other shows. We'll probably be doing more of these interviews if I can get some nice people to talk to me. Thanks for coming on, Aydin.
Yeah, cheers. Anytime, man.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.